Hi friends, this is Pastor Keith for Trinity Chapel, Charlotte. Thank you for joining me for another edition of Walking Through Westminster as we continue looking at the Westminster Shorter Catechism. Today I'm recording inside the coffee shop, so I'm going to do my best to be a little bit quieter, but if there's any background noise, it's just the nature of the game. So I do want to welcome you with me today. Today we're going to look at question 48 of the Westminster Shorter Catechism. And that question asks, what are we especially taught by these words, before me, in the first commandment? The answer given, these words, before me, in the first commandment, teach us that God, who sees all things, takes notice of and is much displeased with the sin of having any other God. So God in the first commandment said, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And this question 48 is really getting at what's the significance of those last two words in English, before me. And it of course means, like we talked about before, that not only are we not to put anything in front of God on our priorities, God comes at the top of the totem pole of our life. That is one thing that the first commandment teaches. But another thing that we're taught by those words, before me, in the first commandment, is that God is the God who sees and knows all things. And so that's what this question is getting at. These words, before me, in the first commandment, teach us that God, who sees all things, takes notice of and is much displeased with the sin of having any other God. There's a Latin phrase that is called Coram Deo, and it's a Latin phrase that simply means before God. And sometimes we use it in the context of like before God's face. And really, the reason that the first commandment then becomes so significant, and the reason that it's the first one, is that we are not only to have no other gods in front of God, as in above Him in our priority list, but we're not to put anything else before His eyes. His eyes cannot behold iniquity. His eyes are too pure to behold our unrighteousness of putting other gods before Him. And so we're taught in the first commandment there that God sees all things, He knows all things, and He takes notice of all things, specifically when we commit idolatry by putting something before Him or having another God. You know, it's a little bit like, you parents will understand this well, and as I'm recording this video, I'm getting ready to welcome my first child into the world in just a couple months. But one thing that you know as parents is that just because your kids are in front of you doesn't prevent them from disobedience. And so there will be times where, mom will say, don't do that, and, little girl, little boy will look up at you, and they'll sort of like look right at you, right in the eyes, and they'll do that thing you didn't want them to do. That's a little bit what it's like in the first commandment when God says, don't have any other gods before me. He's letting us know that He sees all things, He takes notice of all things, and that it greatly displeases Him when we have other gods instead of Him and put other things before Him in our life. God is jealous in the best sense of that word, meaning that He really wants an exclusive relationship with His people. He doesn't want us to be cheating on Him really with other lovers. And so when we commit idolatry like we are forbidden from doing in the first commandment, it displeases God even more because we're doing it in front of His face like those rebellious little children. And so it's really important for us to remember that we live our whole lives coram Deo, before God, in front of God's face. And that needs to not only prick our hearts towards repentance because we mourn the fact that we've wronged God so often by going astray with other lovers, but also it should encourage us in our obedience that when we turn from those other gods, God sees that as well. That also takes place before His face, and that does please Him when we turn from other gods to Him alone. So I hope that's encouraged you this week. I hope that you can walk this week in obedience to that first commandment and turning to Christ when you don't. Regardless, thanks for being with me. I hope that this week finds you blessed, and may the Lord be with each one of you.